Welcome to the inaugural episode of Disability Decoded, Advocacy Unlocked, the podcast where we delve into the world of disability rights, challenges, and advocacy, breaking down barriers and unlocking the power of advocacy for change. My name is Abigail Davis, but you can call me Abbey, your host and fellow advocate on this incredible journey of exploration and education. Before we dive into our topic today, allow me to share a bit about myself. My primary diagnosis is dystonic cerebral palsy with a coexistence of dystonia. My secondary diagnoses include severe bilateral hearing loss, which is corrected with hearing aids, generalized anxiety disorder, and autism spectrum disorder. The challenges of each of these diagnoses intertwine and give me a very unique and individually complex experience. Now that you have a relevant snapshot of my diagnoses, let's start to take a look at my education, the main component of my life that has put me on the path of open discussions and advocacy. From my earliest days in elementary school, I was mainstreamed in classes with support from an individualized education plan or an IEP, laying the foundation for a journey filled with challenges and triumphs. Throughout my high school experience, I continued to navigate the educational landscape, driven by a passion for learning and advocacy. It was during this time that I discovered my power of words and my public speaking skills that would become invaluable in my journey ahead. I even had the incredible honor of giving a TEDx talk in 2015. When I watch that video now, I marvel at the shift that has occurred in my perspectives, while also still adhering to the same worldview, with just a little bit more maturity in how I approach my perspectives and opinions. As I embarked on the beginning of my college journey, I pursued a degree in interdisciplinary studies with a focus on special education from the University of Tennessee at Martin. It was here that my passion for advocacy truly ignited, fueled by a desire to create a more inclusive and equitable society for individuals with disabilities. Before we continue the discussion of my educational background and our discussion topic for today, I'd like to share my personal perspective on inclusion and how that shapes my approach to advocacy. While everyone is entitled to the same rights and opportunities, I believe that true inclusion goes beyond mere equality. Throughout my journey, I've come to appreciate the value of individualized approaches to inclusion. While blanket policies and mandates have their place, there are times when a case-by-case approach allows individuals to reach their fullest potentials despite the challenges that they may face. This nuanced perspective recognizes that each person's journey is unique, and what may work for one individual may not be the best path for another. It's about finding a balance between honoring individual autonomy and providing the support needed to thrive. As we navigate the complexities of disability advocacy, let us remember that inclusion isn't just about fitting into a predefined mold. It's about creating an environment where everyone has the opportunity to live their best life on their own terms. Building on this foundational perspective, I went on to pursue a master's degree in science and vocational rehabilitation counseling at the University of Memphis, with graduation on the horizon in December of 2024. Throughout this program, I have deepened my understanding of disability rights and vocational rehabilitation, furthering my commitment to advocacy and empowerment of my clients. Now that we have covered a brief understanding of my personal challenges and educational background and my perspectives, I would like to dive into the topic of conversation for today's inaugural episode. Today, we embark on a journey through time, tracing the evolution of disability rights from the shadows of discrimination to the forefront of social change. It's a journey marked of resilience, determination, and unwavering commitment of advocates worldwide. Exploring a few of the major people and laws that have shaped our journey thus far will help us to understand just how far we have truly come. Our story begins centuries ago, where individuals with disabilities were often marginalized and hidden from society's view, as well as being denied basic rights and opportunities. From ancient civilizations to the modern era, misconceptions and stigmas surrounding disability have persisted, perpetuating inequity and exclusion. However, amidst the darkness emerged flickers of hope as brave individuals began to challenge societal norms and demand recognition of their rights and humanity. The early pioneers of disability advocacy laid the groundwork for what would become a global movement for change. There are far too many individuals who have played a part in making sure that perspectives are shifted and that people are given the opportunities that they deserve in spite of biases, misplaced judgments, and the challenges their own life presents for them. However, a few of the key players in this movement throughout history were Louis Braille, the inventor of Braille, a reading and writing system for the blind; Helen Keller, an American author, lecturer, and advocate who was both deaf and blind. Despite her disabilities, Keller became the first deaf-blind person to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree and became a prominent advocate for disability rights, women's suffrage, and social justice. Anne Sullivan Macy. Anne was the teacher and lifelong companion to Helen Keller. However, Sullivan's influence extended far beyond her work with Keller, as she continued to advocate for education and rights for individuals with disabilities throughout her life. Her legacy lives on as a pioneer in the field of special education and is an inspiration to teachers and advocates worldwide. Alexander Graham Bell. While primarily known for his invention of the telephone, Alexander Graham Bell also played a significant role in the education and advocacy for people who are deaf. He was a vocal supporter of oralism and the teaching of speech and lip reading to deaf individuals, and co-founded many schools for the deaf. Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt was instrumental in the drafting of the Declaration of Universal Human Rights that was adopted by the United Nations, as well as encouraging her husband to include inclusive policies in the New Deal during the Great Depression, and also showing valiant support for various rehabilitation programs over the course of her life. Some of the more modern disability rights advocates include individuals such as Ed Roberts, an individual who championed for independent living for adults with disabilities; Harriet McBride Johnson; and Justin Dart Jr., who were both outspoken and passionate advocates of disability, championing for the passage of laws such as the Americans with Disabilities Act and the laws that came after it until their deaths. As these voices of past and present grew louder and more unified, a global movement of change began to take shape. Individuals with disabilities and their allies, united by a shared vision of equity and justice, mobilized in communities around the world, demanding recognition of respect and opportunity. It was through their collective efforts and their resilience in the face of adversity and their refusal to accept the status quo that real progress was made. The journey was long and arduous, marked with setbacks and sacrifices, but their legacy lives on in the strides we continue to make towards a more inclusive and equitable society, which led to the introduction of some very important and groundbreaking pieces of legislation. As we have progressed into the subject of laws, let's take a short walk down the path of progress. In the 1920s and 30s, foundations were being laid for future disability rights laws with legislation such as the Smith-Sears Act of 1918, the federal government's first attempt at providing assistance to disabled veterans returning to civilian life after World War I. Social Security Act of 1935, the early establishment of SSI, Supplemental Security Income, and SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. Financial assistance to those who are unable to work who are permanently disabled, programs that are still in use today. In 1936 and 1938, the Randolph-Shepard Act and the Wagner-O'Day Act laid the groundwork for individuals who are blind, giving them the opportunity to work. In 1973, we were given the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. This legislation prevented This legislation prevented discrimination on the basis of disability in programs receiving federal funding and laid the foundation for future disability rights laws. The Education for All Handicapped Children Act of 1975, the first mandate for free and appropriate public education for children with disabilities, that laid the foundation for future laws with more in-depth rights and responsibilities in the educational sphere. The Air Carrier Access Act, ACAA, of 1986. ACAA prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in air travel and requires airlines to provide accommodations such as accessible seating and assistance with boarding and deplaning to passengers with disabilities. Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988. This law prohibits discrimination in housing against individuals with disabilities and requires landlords and property owners to make reasonable accommodations for tenants with disabilities. The Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, of 1990. The ADA is one of the most comprehensive pieces of disability rights legislation. It prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including employment, transportation, public accommodation, and telecommunication. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, of 1990. IDEA ensures that children with disabilities receive free and appropriate public education tailored to their individual needs. It requires schools to provide specialized instruction, accommodation, and related services to students with disabilities. Ticket to Work and Work Incentives Improvement Act of 1999. This law aims to increase opportunities for individuals with disabilities to enter and return to the workforce by providing employment support services and reducing barriers to work. 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act of 2010. This law requires telecommunication services and manufacturers of communication devices to make their products and services accessible to people with disabilities. Over the last 100 years, these laws, among a multitude of others, have played a significant role in advancing the rights and opportunities for individuals with disabilities and promoting greater inclusion and accessibility in society. As we emerge from our history lesson and begin to wrap up our discussion for the day, I'd like to invite you to consider a different perspective on disability, one that challenges the conventional notions and celebrates the inherent abilities within each individual. Too often, disability is viewed through a lens of limitation, as a lack of abilities or potential. But what if we reframed the narrative? What if we saw disability not as a deficit, but as abilities lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right supports and encouragement to emerge? Imagine a world where disability is not seen as a barrier, but as a spectrum of unique talents and strengths, each waiting to be recognized and nurtured. It's a perspective that shifts the focus from what someone can't do to what they can, given the right opportunities and supports. This reframing challenges us to rethink our assumptions and biases, inviting us to see individuals with disabilities not as liabilities, but as valuable contributors to society. It's about creating a culture of inclusion where everyone has the chance to shine. As we embark on this journey of exploration and advocacy, let us embrace this new perspective, one that honors the abilities within each individual and celebrates the diversity of the human experience. I have shared parts of my story and will continue to do so. I have shared a brief history of the people and laws that have come before us to create this movement. Now that those stories have been shared, I believe yours deserves to be shared too. Please submit your stories and perspectives, grievances and experience, and everything in between that will contribute to this valuable conversation. Everyone deserves to shine and have a voice, and I intend to give you that voice. Submissions can be received at disabilitydecoded.discussion@gmail.com. I cannot wait to see what I learn from all of you. Thank you for joining me on this journey throughout the history of disability rights. Stay tuned for future episodes of Disability Decoded, Advocacy Unlocked, where we will continue to explore issues, stories, and triumphs shaping the disability experience, one episode at a time. Thank you all for tuning in and being open-minded. I hope you will return. All resources used in the conceptualization of this episode and the content therein have been cited, verified, and provided in the description of this publication for your consumption and further education on the topics we have discussed today. This has been Disability Decoded and Advocacy Unlocked. We will meet again, I'm sure, but for now, this is Abbey, signing